I did not sleep that night. I lay in the king's chamber in the king's bed, with the king's blood-warm hall breathing under me and the king's 4 wolves lying across the door, and I looked at the ceiling for 8 hours. Then you are only holding back the one. She knew. That was not a suspicion anymore. That was a woman telling me she knew and giving me the night to think about it. And in that whole long black night, do you know what I was afraid of? Not the rope. They hang men for what I was doing, I knew that. I was not afraid of the rope. I was afraid that if I told them, they would stop planting. That was the shape of my cowardice, and I want it written down honestly. I had gotten 90 terraces under seed on a lie, and I had gotten 400 people to walk down a holy road with Maddox on a lie, and I lay in that bed and I thought, if I take the lie away, the grain goes back in the ground with it. I have since learned that this is the exact reasoning of every liar who has ever ruined a good thing, and that it is always, always wrong. But I did not know that yet. I had to be taught it, and she taught me the way she did everything, which was slowly and exactly and without a shred of mercy. The winter went on. Here is what a lie does when you live inside it long enough. It stops being a lie and starts being a job. I got up before the light. I went down to the terraces. I learned to dig properly, which took a month, because a beggar's hands are strong in the wrong ways. I learned the names of every household in Anmark, and then the names of every person in every household, which took longer, and I learned them because I had to, because a man who cannot read must carry his whole hold in his head or drop it. I learned that Grail of the upper households was not a fool and not a zealot. She was a woman with 200 people behind her and no grain, and every hard thing she had ever said to me she had said because she was frightened. I gave her the 9th terrace to run, and she never spoke against me again. I learned that Haven had been the last man to see the true king ride into the pass, and that he had been forgiving himself for it for 11 years, and had not managed it. I learned that the wolves would not eat from my hand. That is a small thing. It sat in me like a stone. They knelt to me and they walked at my heel and they lay across my door at night, and they would not take meat from my hand, not once, not ever, and I told myself it meant nothing. And I learned Siva Brandt. Not quickly. She gave me nothing quickly. But a hold in winter is a small place and the grain is at the middle of it. And so I was at her trestle every day of my life, and a person will hand you their whole self over a set of scales if you stand there long enough. She had been the grain weigher since she was 19. Before that her father had been, and before that his mother. It was not a great office. It was a cold room and a long book and a set of brass pans, and everyone in the hold thought of her as the woman who told you no. She told me no constantly. She told me no about the winter draw, and she told me no about the seed reserve, and she told me no twice, in front of the whole hall, and Haven nearly died of it both times. The second time I laughed. I did not mean to. It came out of me, a great crack of laughter in the middle of the king's hall, at a grain weigher who had just informed 400 people that their king's arithmetic was wrong, and the hall went absolutely silent with horror, and I looked at her and something happened. She smiled. It was not much of a smile. It was there and gone, one corner of her mouth, a thing you would have missed if you had not been staring at her face for 2 months, the way I had been staring at her face for 2 months. And a thing went through me. I have tried to say what it was, and I have never got it right, so I will simply say what happened in my body and let it stand. It was not a fire. It was not a hand on my chest. It was not any of the things they say. It was that the noise stopped. I have had noise in my head since I was 6 years old. Every beggar has it. It is the sound of counting the doors on a street to see which one might feed you, of counting the men in a tavern to see which one will hit you, of counting the days of food and the miles of road and the hours till dark. It never stops. I did not know it never stopped, because I had never once heard it stop. She smiled at me across a hall, and the counting stopped, and I sat in a dead man's chair in a silence I had never heard before in my life, and I thought, in perfect calm in the middle of that silence, oh, so this is what it is like to be somewhere. Then it came back. Of course it came back, but I had heard it stop, and a man who has heard it stop will do anything at all to hear it again. I went to her that night at the trestle, when the hall had gone to bed. She was still working. She was always still working. One tallow candle and the ledger and her red knuckles. You know, I said. She did not look up. Yes. How long? Since you sat down. I put my hands on the trestle. How? And Siva Brandt closed her book, and folded her hands on top of it and looked at me and told me. Because I saw him die, she said. The fog came up the mountain that night and pressed itself against the shutters, and she talked, and I stood there and did not move. She had been 15. Her father was the grain weigher then, and the missing grain train was his business. And so when the king rode into the pass with 8 men, the weigher's family went down to the road to see the count of what came back. They waited 3 days at the road head. On the 3rd night, 1 horse came up out of the pass. Not 8, 1, and on it tied on because he could no longer sit the king. He had 4 days in him, she said, perhaps 5. There had been a slide in the pass, a wall of it, and it had taken the train and the men and most of him. Her voice did not change. That was the worst of it. It did not change once. He was very calm. He asked my father for the count of the grain first, before anything else. He wanted the number. I said, what was the number? 600 sacks, all of it, under the snow. She looked at the candle. And he lay there in the road and worked out that the hold would eat its seed corn by spring, and he told my father so, and then he said the thing I have carried for 11 years. She stopped. Say it, I said. He said, do not tell them I am dead. The fog moved against the shutters. He said, she went on, that if they knew they would eat everything and go down the mountain in the spring and the hold would end. He said, let them wait for me. A hold that is waiting will hold on, and he made my father swear it, and he made me swear it, a girl of 15, in the road. In the dark, and then he asked us to carry him down out of sight of the hold and put him in the ground where nobody walked, and we did, and we came back up, and my father said the king had not come back yet. She turned her hands over on the ledger and looked at them. And he never came back, she said. For 11 years, because we said so. And they held on. He was right. They held on, and they ate their terraces down to nothing, and they buried 9 winters of children, and they held on, because they were waiting for a man in a road. And every night the wolves went down and sat at the head of it, because that is where he is buried, my lord. The room turned over. 40 feet below the 63rd terrace, she said. Under the wall, they are not watching the road. They are sitting on his grave. I had bled into the soil of the 63rd terrace. In the first hour, my hands had opened on the mattock and I had put my palms in that dirt. I sat down on the floor of the granary. There was no dignity available, and I did not look for any. Your father, I said, died 4 years ago. She had not moved from the trestle. So it is only me. I am the only living person who knows what is under that wall, and I have not said it in 11 years because I swore, and because if I said it the hold would have ended exactly as he said it would. And then I walked up out of the pass in his coat. Yes. And you said nothing. I said nothing, she agreed. Why? And she was quiet for a long time, long enough that the candle guttered, and she reached out and straightened it without looking. Because on the 11th day, she said, you asked me for the ledger. I looked up at her. 11 years, Siva said, and no one has ever asked me for the ledger. My father had it and no one asked him either. They ask for grain. They do not ask for the count. You sat in that chair for 11 days and then you came down into a cold room and asked a woman for a book. And when you could not read it, you said so, in front of the granary master, which is a thing a proud man would rather die than do. She stood up. She came around the trestle. She stood in front of me while I sat on the floor of the granary like a dropped sack. "He was a good king," she said. "He was. He was a better man than you, and I loved him, and I have kept his death in my mouth for 11 years, and it has rotted my teeth. I know. But he lied to them." Her voice cracked once on that, and it was the only time. "He lied to them to save them, and it worked, and it has been eating this hold alive for a decade. 61 days, 9 empty bins, 90 terraces of the best soil on this mountain lying fallow because they are holy." She was breathing hard. "And you walked in here on a bigger lie than his. And the first thing you did was open the granary. And the second thing you did was tell them the number. And the third thing you did was put the road under wheat." She stopped. She got herself back. I watched her do it, and it was like watching someone lift something very heavy without letting their face show it. "So I have been standing at this trestle for 4 months," she said, "weighing you. And I want you to understand what I have decided, my lord, because I will not say it twice." I got up off the floor. "I do not care that you are not him," she said. "I care that you are becoming him. And I do not know yet whether that is the best thing that has ever happened to this hold or the last thing that will ever happen to it. And I am the only person alive who can tell the difference, and I am so tired." And I did the thing I had wanted to do, since a woman told me the sacks were coming in light. I did not touch her. I want that clear. I did not put a hand on her. I had no right to, and I knew I had no right to, and it was 4 more months before I earned the right and she gave it. What I did was this. I picked up her ledger off the trestle, and I held it out to her with both hands, the way you hand a man his sword. "Then weigh me every day," I said. "Every day until you know. And on the day the pan comes down against me, Siva, you say it in the hall in front of all of them, and I will not raise a hand, and I will not say one word, and I will walk down that road in the snow. You have my oath, not the king's, mine. Ivar Ashwake out of the low country who steals coats." She took the book, and the noise in my head stopped again, and this time it stopped for a long, long while. And I stood in a cold granary at the bottom of the world holding nothing at all and understood, with total clarity, that I had just handed a stranger the only thing I owned, and that I would do it again every day until I died. That was the bond. Nobody has ever believed me. They want the mark, the light, the hall going gold. It was a woman taking a book out of my hands in a cold room and the counting stopping. Spring came up the mountain, and the 90 terraces came up with it. I have seen a great many things now. I have never seen anything like the morning the road went green. It came up all at once, the way upland wheat does, 1 week black soil and the next a green haze lying over 90 walled shelves running down into the fog, and 400 people stood on the terrace steps at dawn and did not make a sound. Then Grail of the upper household sat down in the dirt and put her apron over her face. We had eaten the 61 days. We had eaten them down to 8 in the last week, and the last of it was sweepings and the boiled ends of things, and 2 old men died in that week, and I carried one of them myself. It was very close. I have never told the hold how close. Siva knows, because Siva is the one who told me. 8 days. And the road came up green. We took the first cut in high summer, and it was the largest harvest Anmark had had in 20 years, because 90 terraces of soil that has rested for 11 years will give you back everything it has been holding. We filled 4 bins, then 6, then 8. I stood in that undercroft on the day we filled the 8th bin, and having the granary master, who was 71 years old, sat down on the step and wept into his hands, and I put my hand on his bald head like a fool. And across the room Siva Brant closed her ledger and looked at me, and the pan did not come down. She said it in the autumn. Not the accusation, the other thing. We were on the 11th terrace at dusk, walking the wall. I walked the terraces every evening by then, all of them. It took 2 hours, and she had begun to walk them with me because the count is better done with your feet than with a book. And we came to the corner where you can see the whole of the mountain going down into the dark, 90 green shelves and the road running through them, and she stopped. They are talking about your Luna, she said. I know. Grail has 3 cousins. I know that too. You will have to choose, she said. Because a hold wants a seat filled, and they have just watched you fill one. The sun went down behind the shoulder of the mountain, and the fog started to come up the way it did every night of the world. Siva, I said. Don't. I am going to. You are going to make it impossible for me to do my office, she said, and her voice was shaking and she was furious about it. I have never seen anyone so angry at their own voice. Do you understand that? I am the witness. I am the pan and the weight. If you say it, I am a woman who did not tell the truth about her king because she wanted him, and every good thing I have done in this hold for 4 months turns into that forever. Yes. Then don't say it. Then I will do something else, I said. And I turned around on that terrace wall with the fog coming up under us, and I said, I am going to tell them. She went completely still. Not because of you, I said. Get that out of your head now. I will not have you carrying it. Because of Haven. She stared at me. He was the last man to see him ride into the pass, and he has been forgiving himself for 11 years, and he cannot. And every night he looks at me and thinks he has been given it back, and he has not. And I am taking that from him every day. My voice was not steady. Because there are 2 old men in the ground from this spring who died waiting, and I let them die thinking he came home. Because there is a man under the wall on the 63rd terrace who told his hold to hold on, and never got to hear that they did. And because I have 400 people who will do anything I say, and I got them with a coat off a corpse, and every single good thing I have built here is standing on it, and I am not going to spend the rest of my life on a floor that is not there. The fog came up over the wall and put itself around us. They will hang me, I said, probably. So let me say the other thing first, since it will keep. Ivar. The counting stops, I said. She did not understand. I saw her not understand. When you look at me, I said, the counting stops. I have counted every day of my life since I was 6. Doors, men, days, miles, coins. It never stops. It has never once stopped. I looked at the fog. It stopped in a cold room when you took a book out of my hands. That is all I have got, Siva. I have no bond mark and no wolf and no name that is mine, and I cannot even read your book. I have a silence, and it is yours, and I am giving it to you before I go and stand up in that hall, because after I stand up in that hall you will not want it. The wolves came out of the fog then, all 4 of them. They did that sometimes. They had begun to walk the terraces with me. And the lead wolf, the gray one, the one that had knelt in the grain yard with my arm still in the sack, went past me. It went to her. It put its head against her hip and it stood there, and she reached down without looking, the way you touch something you have touched 1,000 times, and she put her hand in its ruff. And I understood. I stood on a terrace wall in the fog, and I understood why the wolves had knelt. You come down here, I said, every night, don't you? She did not answer. 11 years, I said. Every night at the road, at the wall on the 63rd terrace, where he is. You have come down here every night of your life since you were 15, and you have sat with them on his grave, because you are the only one who knows he is in it. Her hand was in the wolf's ruff, and her face was wet, and she did not make a sound. They did not kneel to my face, I said. No, she said. They knelt to the coat, I said, because it is a black upland coat with a wolf collar and it smelled of the pass, and they have been waiting 11 years for something out of that pass. And they are wolves, Siva. They are not an omen. They are 4 animals who have sat at a grave for 11 years with the one person who ever comes. They knelt, she said, because I was standing in the grain line behind you. The fog went by. I was 4th in the queue, she said. You had your arm in the sack. They came across the yard and they came past you, and then you turned around and everyone screamed and they stopped. She was crying now, properly, the way a person cries who has been holding it for a decade and has finally been given permission by the arrival of somebody worse off than themselves. They were coming to me. They come to me every day. And you turned round in a dead man's coat, and 400 people fell on their knees. And by the time the wolves had worked out what was happening, they were already down. I laughed. I could not help it. I stood on that wall and laughed until I had to put my hand on the stone. So the whole thing, I said, the whole thing, the wolves, the coat, the name, the scar, was a woman standing behind a thief, she said, in a grain line. I told them the next night. I want to set down exactly how it went, because it has been told a great many ways since, and most of them are better than the truth, and I would like the truth to survive somewhere. I did not do it well. I got up in that chair with 400 people at the trestles and the harvest in the bins under our feet, and I could not get my voice to work for a long moment, and the hall went quiet in a way that frightened me, because it was the quiet of people who love you, and are afraid you are about to tell them you are ill. I said, my name is Ivar Ashwick. Somebody laughed. They thought it was the start of a toast. I am a beggar out of the low country, I said. I have never been north of the ridge in my life. I came up through the pass in the last week of autumn, and I took this coat off a dead trader under a rock, and on the second day of winter I put my arm into your grain sack to steal from you, and your wolves came across the yard, and you knelt, and I let you. The hall did not move. I have never sat in a chair, I said. I have never had a wolf. I cannot read the ledger that runs this hold. Everything I have done here I did by asking Haven what your king would have done and doing that. Haven had not moved. He was standing at the foot of the dais where he always stood, and he was looking at me, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to look away from a man's face. Your king is dead, I said. The sound in that hall. He died 11 years ago, 4 days after the slide in the pass took the grain and his 8 men, and he was brought up out of it alive, and he lay in the road and gave his last order, and the order was this: do not tell them I am dead. Let them wait for me. A hold that is waiting will hold on. I made myself keep going. And you did. You held on. He was right. And it kept you alive for 11 years, and it has been killing you for the last 4, because a hold that is waiting does not sow. And you have been eating your own seed corn on top of 90 terraces of the finest soil in this mountain, because you would not put a mattock into the king's road. I stepped down off the dais. He is under the wall of the 63rd terrace, I said, 40 feet below the road. That is where your wolves have been going every night for 11 years. They have not been watching the road. They have been sitting on him. I do not know how long the silence went on. Then Haven, the granary master, 71 years old, who had watched a king ride into a pass and had not forgiven himself for a decade, said, in a voice like a hinge, "Who told you?" And there it was, the one thing I had not worked out how to carry. I opened my mouth, and Siva Brant put down her scales and stood up from her stool at the trestle by the wall and said, "I did." She walked up the middle of that hall. 400 people, and every one of them turned, and she came up the middle of it in her wearer's apron with her chapped red hands, a small woman, 27 years old, and she went past me, and she turned around, and she faced the whole of Anmark from the foot of the dais where I had just been standing. "I was 15, she said. "I was in the road with my father when they brought him up out of the pass. I heard the order. I swore it. And I have kept it for 11 years, and my father kept it until he died, and I have gone down to that wall every night of my life to sit with him because nobody else in this hold knows he is there." Nobody made a sound. "He was a good king," she said, "and it was a good order, and it was wrong, and I have known it was wrong since the 4th bin went empty, and I could not say so, because I had sworn." She lifted her chin. "And then a thief walked into my grain yard in a dead man's coat, and you all fell on your knees, and I let you." She turned her head and looked at me, just for a moment. I let you, she said, because on his 11th day he came down into my granary and asked me for the ledger. Nobody had ever asked me for the ledger, and I stood at my trestle for 4 months and I weighed him every day in the book, and I want you to hear the count. And Siva Brant, the grain weigher of Anmark, gave them the count. He opened the granaries in the first week and told you the true number, which no king has done in this hold in living memory. He put the road under wheat, and it fed you, and you are standing in the largest harvest in 20 years, and you know it because you carried it up the steps on your own backs. He has walked every terrace on this mountain every evening for 8 months. He learned 400 names because he cannot read them. He has never once put himself in front of a household at the trestle, and I know that because I am the trestle. She stopped. And tonight, she said, with the bins full and the winter beaten and not one living soul who could have contradicted him except me, he stood up in that chair and gave it all back. She looked around the hall. I have weighed him for 8 months, she said, and I am the only person in this world who could tell you what he came to, and I am telling you. The pan came down on his side. It came down hard. They did not hang me. They did something much worse, and it took them 3 days to do it. For 3 days that hold argued. It argued in the hall and on the steps and down the terraces and in the granary, and I was not in any of it, because they had asked me, very politely, which was unbearable to wait in the king's chamber while they decided. And so I sat in a dead man's room and listened to 400 people through the floor for 3 days. On the 3rd evening, Haven came for me. He had been crying. He had been crying on and off for 3 days, and he did not bother to hide it, and when he opened that door he looked at me for a long moment and then he said, "You never sat in it right." "What?" "The chair." He wiped his face with the flat of his hand the way he had in the grain yard on the first day 11 months ago. "You never sat in it right. He used to put his elbow on the left arm. You never touched it. 8 months I watched you sit in that chair with your hands on your knees like a man in a waiting room." He laughed and it broke in half. I knew. Somewhere in me, my lord, I knew, and I would not let myself know because I wanted him back. I could not speak. "Come down," he said. "They have voted." The hall was full and the chair was empty. They had put the dust back on it. I do not know how, I never asked. I have never wanted to know, but the arms of that chair had a fine gray blanket of dust on them again, the way they had on the day I walked in, and it sat at the top of the hall like a shut door. Grail of the upper household spoke. It was her they had chosen to say it, and she stood up, and she was steady, and she did not look at me kindly, and I have loved her for it ever since. "The chair belongs to the Alpha King of Anmark," she said, "and the Alpha King of Anmark is under the wall on the 63rd terrace, and we will go down and bring him up in the spring and put him in the ground properly, with the hold standing over him, and there will be a stone, and it will have his name on it, and every child in this hold will learn what he did in that road." The hall said yes, 400 people quietly. "Nobody sits in that chair for 5 years, Grail said. "Not you, not anyone. It has been empty 11, it can be empty 5 more, and this time we will know why." "Yes," I said. "And you," said Grail of the upper households, "are not the king." "No," I said, "I am not." "You are the steward," she said, "because the terraces need a man who walks them, and you walk them, and because we have watched what you do with a granary key, and because you gave it back when you did not have to." She stopped. Her mouth went hard. "And because we would rather be fed by an honest beggar than starve for a holy road. We have had 11 years of the other thing." And then she said the thing that has been on the stone in that hall ever since, and which they will tell you was a great speech, and which was in fact a woman with a mattock's hands telling a thief where he stood. "You will not be called by his name. You will be called by yours, and you will earn it out here in front of us every year at the count. There is not much more." They gave me a house on the 9th terrace, which is not a large house, and a key to the granary, which is, and they made me stand at the count every autumn in front of the whole hold, while Siva Brant reads the book out loud, line by line, and any household may stop her and ask. She has never once softened a line for me. She tells me no in front of 400 people at least twice a year. Haven says it is the finest entertainment in the uplands. We brought him up in the spring. It took 2 days to open the wall on the 63rd terrace. And the whole hold came down, and the 4 wolves went in front of the litter all the way up the mountain, and they have not gone back down to that wall since, not once, not in 6 years. They sleep at Siva's door now. They always did, really. I was only ever a thing in the way. There is a stone in the hall with his name on it. The children learn what he did in the road. They learn the other part too, that a hold that is only waiting will hold on, and hold on, and hold on, until there is nothing left to hold, and they learn it because Siva made them put it on the stone, and she stood in that hall and would not sit down until they agreed. And in the 5th autumn at the count, when she had finished the book and closed it and the hall was standing up to go, she stayed at the trestle, and I stayed, because I always stay, because I have stood at that trestle nearly every day of my life for 6 years, and I do not intend to stop. She said, it has been 5 years. Yes. The chair, she said, is not going to be sat in, ever, I have decided. I know. So there is nothing to be the Luna of, she said, which is convenient because I have never wanted to be one, and I have wanted for a very long time to be something else. And she put her hand out flat on the trestle, palm up next to the scales, her red chapped knuckles, the weigher's hand. I put mine into it. And the counting stopped. It has never come back, 6 years. I lie awake sometimes in a small house on the 9th terrace and listen for it, out of habit, the way you go on reaching for a tooth that has come out. And there is nothing there, and there is her breathing. And above us on the mountain there are 90 terraces of wheat standing over a road, and somewhere in the dark below them 4 gray wolves are lying across our door, and none of it is mine. And I did not earn any of it honestly, and I have spent every single day since paying it back. That is the whole of it. That is what happened at Anmark. I was a thief. She was the only one who ever weighed me true, and she is the one who told them.